Okay, everybody, it's time for another edition of Live from the Heartland. I'm Michael James. I'm your host. We're here in Chicago. We are recording this on the 12th of April. It's a Wednesday. The White Sox are actually playing as we speak. It is for the week of April 15th. It'll be broadcast on WLUW, our home base, 88.7 Chicago at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. Also at WLUW.org. And you can get it a little bit earlier, usually at youtube.com/heartlandmedia/videos. It also goes up on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and it's on next Thursday night, 9 o'clock on CAN TV, Channel 21. So with all that said, let's get into the real nitty gritty. You know, if you're following the news, what's in the news a whole lot are guns and abortion. Right at the top of the news all the time, we have the situation of dueling federal judges. One of them from Texas is trying to get rid of this mifepristone, an abortion pill that's been used for 23 years. And the other judge he's put out a negative decision about the CDC. And the other judge up in Washington State had a different decision. So we know that all the blue states are stockpiling mifepristone. And we also know that when people are given an opportunity to vote, like in Kansas and in Wisconsin, they have voted in favor of abortion rights. Enough on that for now. You can get all the news you want about that. Also, one of the saddest things that happened, we had another shooting down this time in Louisville. A number of people were killed. It's a little bit out of control, this gun stuff. Here's a little labor report from the Seattle Times, reported yesterday that more than 40 progressive organizations are showing their support for Starbucks union workers by urging the company's new CEO, Narasimhan, to start a new chapter with workers. Quote, "We urge you to create and build a healthy working relationship with unionized partners." These organizations sent a letter on Tuesday. They include a number of, like the AFL-CIO and the Service Employees International Union. Basically, they include unions that represent 62 million and more than 496 member organizations. The report also said at least 290 stores out of 9,000 in the U.S. have formed a union. Starbucks declined to enter a labor neutrality agreement, a contract in which an employer agrees to support a union drive. Starbucks has had at least 513 unfair labor practice charges filed against them, and at least 110 charges were filed against the union, but 78 of those were later dismissed, according to the NLRB, the Labor Relations Board. More on labor. We have a situation in New Jersey where Rutgers University has 9,000 people out on strike, could grow to 11,500. And here in Illinois, we have 3 strikes going on at schools, Governor State, Prairie State, or maybe it's Chicago State, and Eastern Illinois University. So pay attention to that. People are looking for a better deal in a time of a growing economy and rising prices. The workers deserve more. Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky has contacted us and is reporting an opportunity to provide comments and feedback to help our Lake Michigan shoreline be safer and more resilient to damage. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is currently conducting a study on Lake Michigan's shoreline and the storm damage in the community. Their goal is to determine the best long-term solutions to protect important infrastructure along the shoreline. Need your help, they say. It is crucial that the Army Corps hears directly from the community about their concerns and ideas. So this study is actually called Chicago Shoreline General Reevaluation, a Coastal Storm Risk Management Study for the city of Chicago. And you can post your comments until, I think, April 30th. Also, once again, I want to bring your attention, the Nuclear Energy Information Service, Dave Kraft, has called on all of us here in Illinois to call our state reps before April 18th, urging them to oppose SB 0076, a bill that repeals Illinois nuclear reactor construction's moratorium. A bad thing that happened in the world, I'm going to give you a report. There's plenty of it. From Democracy Now!, Burma's military junta has carried out its deadliest attack yet on civilians in rebel-held areas. It bombed a meeting of community leaders just yesterday. That would be Tuesday, the 11th, in Sagaing, that's Sagaing region, killing an estimated 100 people, including 30 children. The military junta has increasingly used airstrikes to crush the resistance and to seize power in 2021, often targeting schools and clinics run by the opposition. And the United Nations has warned of worsening humanitarian and human rights crisis in Burma, with mass arrests, torture of prisoners, the killing of civilians, and media repression. Here in Chicago, take note, Walmart is closing 11 stores on the south and west sides. They also claim they haven't been making any money, but I doubt it. And in memoriam, there's a few things. They're all coming pretty fast today. Yesterday, I learned that Harrison Bankhead, a Chicago jazz giant, a bassist, a musician, artist of the highest order, he passed away. Been a cornerstone of the Chicago jazz scene for a long time. And Comrade Bernie Farber, a longtime activist, active with Students for Democratic Society at Roosevelt University, et cetera, he has passed away. And I noted in the New York Times that Kwame Braithwaite, a photographer at 85 years old, who always had his lens on Black pride, Black is beautiful, et cetera, great photographer, he has passed away. And I don't have all the information, but if some of you are wondering what happened to Twin Peaks, one of them, my son Katie and Lake James, under the name Lake James, has a new internet radio show once a month. And we'll try to post that for people who are going to be looking at that with the actual information. Last week, we had Kelly Cassidy on talking about the election of Brandon Johnson. We're going to follow that up with Don Rose a little bit later in the show. And we also had a fellow named John Melrod, who has a new book out, Fighting Times on the Front Lines of the Class Struggle. He's showing up in town now. He'll be at Pilsen Community Books on Monday night, the 17th, 7 p.m. That's 1102 West 18th Street. He'll also be in Milwaukee on Wednesday, the 19th at Boswell Book Company. Okay, I think that'll be enough for our little bit of banter at the start of the show. We've got 2 interviews coming up. We're going to have Don Rose talking politics, and then we're going to have my cousin, Adam James, who I got to know when he was playing football at Northwestern. He works in movies, he's involved in sports, and he's going to give us the sports and a report on a current movie he's working on. So we'll be right back with more Live from the Heartland here on the left end of your dial. 88.7 Chicago, WLUW.org, YouTube.com/Heartland Media, etc. Hey, we're back with more Live from the Heartland for the week of April 15th. And now we're going to talk a little serious politics. We've got our friend on, Don Rose. I've been getting Don to come on the show many times over the last 4, 5, 10 years, filling us in on his view of things. And before we start today, Don, talking about the election of Brandon Johnson, et cetera, one of the things I like to do as a getting older fellow with a show is to record a little information about my friends, my comrades, my guests, how they got into the movement and a few of the things they've done. So how about giving us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've been a leftist virtually all my life. In 1947, I was passing out leaflets for Henry Wallace for president and dabbled with, various movements that were going on. I was not prominent in them, but I was a participant. I was also in the jazz world and got to know people like Charlie Parker. And so I was more or less immersed in some degree of Black culture, which gave me a lot of sympathy for, civil rights, whatever we called it back in those days. In the middle 50s, when I was living in Paris, I got to know Jimmy Baldwin, and that enhanced my immersion. And I participated in sit-ins and things like that. And when I came back to Chicago later in the 50s, there was a great white riots going on at the far south and southeast end of Chicago, where some Black people had moved into public housing there, and I was roped into. I joined a group that were trying to combat it and write leaflets and take them out there, hoping to calm the white tensions, and found out that we were hated more than the Black people were, because we were what's. Yeah. And so I was in and around it. In 1962, I met Timuel Black, and he later asked me to. We were most interested in jazz, and he had been just run something called the Rainbow Beach Wade-In. I don't know. A long forgotten movement. He ran for alderman in 1963 against one of Daley's old plantation guys. And I got heavily immersed in that and met quite a few people. We wound up, I helped assemble a group of independent Black aldermanic candidates. We only elected one of them that year. Unfortunately, it was not Tim. It was a guy named Charlie Chu. Later that year, we got involved in organizing for the March on Washington, the great one where King gave his famous speech. And
yeah, that was my first big event, going to that.
Continued on there. I tried to merge the Black movement, as I knew it, with a white independent movement. And I helped elect the first North Side independent alderman. In the meantime, in '68, I was part of the protest. I was the spokesperson, the media spokesperson for what was called the MOB, which was a large organization, familiar with it. It was there that, I gave Rennie Davis the line, the whole world is watching. So that's one of my live-on things. I also helped Tim Black create the term plantation politics.
Well, you've been quite a guy. I first knew you from the mobilization, and then off the Democratic convention, we've been running into each other and sometimes getting interviewed on the same show, et cetera, for a long time. And you've been a wonderful resource for this show, and I want to just thank you and acknowledge that. So we'll do more on your past. I wrote down here, let's have Don on talking about jazz sometime. But let's turn to this wonderful election here in Chicago. I had you on and Ed Mullen before the election, and both predicted a narrow Johnson victory. This was up against big money, media play, everything talking about Vallis was in the lead. And there was a lot of anxiety and trepidation going into the election on the part of a lot of people. And it didn't take long. We got the victory. Tell us a little bit about it. What's your take on the Johnson victory?
Well, of course, the polls were showing a 2 to 4 point lead for Vallis, which was within the margin of error. And I would say that I was not optimistic, but obviously he had a chance within the margin of error. And what happened, we later found that he was really leading in the mail-in ballots, as well as a tremendous election day effort, led by the Chicago Teachers Union and SEIU and a couple of other unions who had a lot of people on the street overcoming whatever might have come in from the Vallis side. They just did not have the ground game. And we basically won it on election day on the ground game. So it could have gone the other way if Vallis had a better ground game and beat us, but it was more, I think, the combination of the ground game and one hidden issue, which is back there. People didn't talk about it much, but the way I put it, both of these candidates were haunted not by what they were doing in the campaign itself, what they were saying in the campaign itself, but Johnson having expressed an interest in defunding the police and calling for a lot more taxes, and Vallis at one point saying that he was more of a Republican than a Democrat and that he was personally opposed to abortion. Now, abortion is not anything a mayor of Chicago has anything to do about, but I believe that struck a chord at this particular time when the issue is so fraught. And, all the money he was getting from the Republican side and so on pretty much proved that politically he was more of a Republican than a Democrat, at least certainly not a progressive Democrat, and that was the hidden thing that nobody would go to the polls saying, I'm voting for him because he's pro-abortion or anti-abortion. But this is an underlying thing throughout the country. It's a very sensitive and fraught time on the issue. And I would say that was the one issue that hasn't been analyzed yet. I wish we had a exit poll, but we don't. And some of these post-exit polls are not very accurate because people misremember things. But I think that was the thing that gave us what turned out to be the most historic, greatest progressive victory that we've had in a mayoral race. And I said, I confounded a few people when I said it even surpassed Harold's election.
Talk about that.
No, just when we look back at Harold's election, although it's looked upon as a coalition victory, it was primarily a black victory. He carried all the black wards with 92, 93% of the vote. The white vote was only 9% of his victory, the white and Latino vote, only 9% of his victory. I have to say at that time, the Latino vote was minuscule. And he did not carry a single ward. He did, he got more votes in some lakefront wards, but this was fundamentally a black victory. You go to today, having gone through, the Obama election and a number of other things, outside the mayoralty, which has always stayed to the conservative or machine side. And suddenly, Johnson carried 29 wards, a majority of the wards in the city. He carried, there were, I think, 16 black wards, and the other 13 were mainly white, and there was a couple of Latino majority wards thrown in there. If you look at the vote, he carried everything, in effect, north of Belmont Street along the lake. Wards 44, which he flipped, that had earlier gone for Vallis in the first round, Ward 46, 48, and of course, you're familiar with Ward 49, one of the biggest victories in the city.
73% for Brandon.
Right. And then he carried the 47th, which is probably our most, outside the 49th, our most consistent independent progressive ward. it was a resounding victory, a huge majority, even though it was a relatively small vote. We only turned out 36%, I think, was the final count or close to final count, compared to a gigantic vote in the Washington election.
Well, I kept thinking all along that even though there were a number of black aldermen who came out for Vallis and former Black Panther Bobby Rush, not to mention Pat Quinn and Senator Durbin, but what hit me was I couldn't see the black community supporting Vallis, and they didn't. They went against their alderman, and clearly he got the majority of the black vote. He certainly got the 49th and a number of other places. What do you think now this means? What do you think? I'm not sure if we have all the figures about the aldermanic districts and how they went, but we have a new sizable progressive caucus growing in the city council. Brandon's coming in. He's had a lot of big union support. Where do you think things are going in town here?
Well, I would like to think that things are heading in a solid direction. I have to say, Brandon is inexperienced. As they were saying, he never ran things. By the way, Vallis got 20% of the black vote, which is quite creditable.
Well, all his ads were filled with black people. I mean, a lot of money, a lot of ads, all black people in his ads, mostly.
I want to comment on that, by the way. The overwhelming majority of the people who came out for Vallis, including the blacks, were people from the old machine. They were led by the 42nd and the 2nd and 42nd Ward aldermen, who are conservatives, old line machine guys. Riley was basically a Madigan guy, and the blacks who endorsed him were the older machine blacks. Jesse White, who was a wonderful guy and a benign figure, came out of the old machine, and his alderman Burnett, another one, the one prominent alderman, a Latino alderman, Lopez, was a Burke guy. He was the one who would just pinned himself against everything against Laurie that could if she breathed in, he breathed out, and so it was kind of a reassembling of the old machine. A few surprises in there. I don't know what was in Bobby's mind, Bobby Rush, but we had to. If you remember, 4 years ago, he came out for Bill Daley.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
He's
he changed. He got God and he changed.
I still love him in many ways. I helped him in his first runs for alderman and state rep, and until he finally won. So we go back a long way with him, just as I did with Chewy, who was my first choice.
Yeah.
Anyway, the question is going to be how he develops a relationship to the police department. I think the most important thing that's going to happen in the next month, I think he has to do it, is finding a new head of the police department. And he's got to juggle a near impossible thing, finding someone from inside who is trusted and yet who has a perspective of reform. And I don't know what's going on in there, but that's going to tell part of the story. He also has to get himself aligned with the business people who almost uniformly came out against him. I frankly do not think he's going to be able to impose any, if not many, of his taxes that he's proposed, which are, I should say, liberal unicorns from 10, 15 years ago, the LaSalle Street tax and so on. he might find some acceptable revenue. I would hope that they can get through a real estate transfer tax. And that is the beginning of the revenue that we need. He's not going to be able to do a lot without more revenue. He promises to continue and expand on Invest South and West, and that's going to depend on revenues. And I have to say, who he picks for his administration. By himself, I have, I should say, not mistrust, but misgivings about his abilities. He demonstrated ignorance in a lot of areas, although he was on the right track on race relations and policing, and the way we go about solving the crime problem. So I have to say things are very, very much up in the air. He will have a working majority on the city council. I don't know whether they are going to follow through on declaring their independence, which they started to do just before the election or while the election was in process. We do have a strong council, weak mayor system, which we saw in effect when the Verdoliak 29 was running things in the most of the first term of Harold Washington. And if they're going to go in their own direction and keep their 28 committees that they set up and so on, I still think he has enough support there, and there are enough progressives to want to go through and do this. I'm particularly concerned about the real estate transfer tax and TIF reform. It's there for the taking if they can put it all together. I think those are the two major economic thrusts that we can do. But right now, I'd like to be slightly optimistic about the next 6 months, which are really going to define him.
I want to a couple of things that as you were talking, when you mentioned Jesse White and then his alderman Burnett. We had Burnett on the show a long time ago. Nice guy. He's alderman of one of the poorest wards, and he's one of the most conservative. On Johnson, he
interestingly enough, he's an ex-convict.
Aha. Right. All the more reason to be conservative and cautious, I guess. But the other thing about Johnson is he really has started talking a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-class line, like he really tries to include a lot of people. I'm wondering what you think are some of his, besides dealing with the police, any other initial projects or big moves? And while we're at it, why don't you maybe talk a little bit about our outgoing mayor?
Well, I think the big moves outside the police will be in what taxes he is able to get through, and working things out with the business community. And of course, fulfilling his promise about expanding Lori Lightfoot's Invest Southwest, which is a great idea. Not even though Harold expressed a need for it and a desire to do it, he died before he could do anything like it.
Let me ask you, we're going to run out of time, so there's a lot more to talk about, but what are the national ramifications of Johnson's election here in Chicago, as well as the election to the Supreme Court of a liberal up in Wisconsin, changing the control of that court?
I would say that this is a further extension of the abortion issue, and it may turn out, I think it can turn out positively for the Democrats in the long run, as we've seen it and the root cause of crime issue uh, dominate dominate now, and as its implications are very strong for the Democrats. We can um, Wisconsin, for example, solidifies the blue wall. The blue wall, being the three big states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And I suspect Wisconsin is going to move away from its half-point victories for the Democrats to a significant victory, not as big as Michigan, but a decent victory next time. So these things make me optimistic about the presidency, but we don't know yet who's going to be running against whom, and so on and so forth. These are just harbingers, and I call them optimistic harbingers.
Don Rose, it's great talking to you. I'm going to throw one little last thing in. Do you have any view on how it came to be that Mayor Lightfoot going out has brought in racing, that downtown has turned into a racetrack during the summer? Bad decision, good decision? How did it come to be? We got to live with it.
I don't know where she came up with the idea. I'm very dubious about it. She's trying to bring something in, I think, that she thought might parallel some of the fests that previous mayors instituted, and she wanted this one to be hers. I don't know anybody who's really in love with that idea. So another misjudgment on her part, like, her greatest misjudgment, to my mind, was keeping her chief of police in. Her greatest positive judgment, of course, was going for Invest Southwest.
Well, Don Rose, it's always great to talk to you, and I'm sure I'll see you in person in the not too far off. And
very likely.
I'll be in touch with you real soon about coming on again.
Always glad to do it.
Right on, brother. Okay, everybody, stay tuned here on the left end of your dial, WLUW 88.7, WLUW.org, et cetera, et cetera. You can get us a lot of ways. We're taking a short musical break, and we'll be right back for a little bit of sports, a little bit of film with a cousin conversation. Hey, we're back with more Live from the Heartland, and now it's time for what's become kind of regular deal here, a cousin report. I do go to family for help and support, particularly when they've got something good to say. And I'm in touch with my cousin, Adam James, who lives out there in California. And we got to know each other when he was playing football at Northwestern a number of years back. He went back to California. We did work in a couple of Andy Davis movies together. And he's gotten involved in films. We're both members of the Screen Actors Guild. But we're going to do a little talk with him. We're calling it the Cousin Report. And he's going to talk a little bit of sports. Then we're going to talk a little bit about movie industry, and then we're going to talk a little bit about a project he's involved with. So in rapid succession, on your mark, get set, go. What do you got in sports, Adam, and how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's great to see you, and hello to everybody there in the Heartland. Always appreciate being on and having a chance to talk with you and talk a little sports, politics, movies, all that fun stuff.
Right on.
On the sports scene, there's a couple controversial things. Of course, the NCAA.
That's what we like. We like controversy here.
That's why when you asked me to come up with a couple topics, this is a couple that came right to mind. A little controversy in the women's basketball tournament. First of all, a great big shout out to Caitlin Clark and the Iowa women's basketball team. Tremendous run. But also an even bigger shout out to LSU. Women's Tigers did a phenomenal job. They won that championship game. They deserve to get that invitation to the White House, as champions do. So the controversy was, of course, that the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, had made a comment about how, boy, that Iowa team sure played great. It would be nice to invite them too, which came across as a little bit possibly racially motivated.
Pretty much all white team, not quite, but
precisely. And Caitlin certainly as a superstar player, but at the same time, it wasn't really appropriate. Only the winners get invited. Right. And so it did come across as a little unusual. But she quickly backtracked, didn't intend to make that kind of a statement. There's sometimes, in all of our lives, there's moments where these deep feelings and thoughts that maybe we don't act on often come up. And maybe Jill made a mistake in saying those words. But I don't think the intent was malicious. And I'm glad that people were able to move past it, not make it a big negative out of something truly positive.
Do you have anything on the hand? This, I'm getting the ring, and you don't have one.
Yes, well, obviously, whenever champions, get that final moment, they'll sometimes let out some of those emotions. It's an incredibly stressful process to get there, to then play that game and achieve that success. So there's moments that maybe aren't 100% appropriate, but I don't think she was out of line. She was showing the finger, I'm getting my ring, you ain't. And then the other thing was the John Cena, you don't see me. So it was just a little bit of fun, a little bit of trash talking. I wouldn't take a big offense to it myself. And if I did it to somebody else, I hope they wouldn't take offense from me.
Hey, Adam James, how about a little bit of hockey now? There was some guys wearing pink jerseys, some teams, not all teams, and the Hawks didn't come through as best they might. Give us a report on what's going on in hockey on that front.
Well, first of all, we should give a lot of kudos to National Hockey League for having done this in the first place. They've been doing this for many years, having these Pride Nights.
What it is, Pride Night.
Pride Night is an effort by the Hockey League to reach out to a portion of our community that sometimes feels not included. And it was an effort to say, you're absolutely welcome to come to our games. We hope that you'll become a fan of our team and that you'll support us. And so they started having these once a year, one night during the season. They encourage people who are part of that community to come out. And they do things like wear warm-up jerseys that have the assembly, the various, colors and patches to show that they're supporting that community. Unfortunately, there were a few players who, for various reasons, often political, often religious, have refused. And so National Hockey League's been kind of a tough spot there. I encourage them to continue to work through it. I encourage those people who believe that putting on a jersey of a certain color means that they're endorsing a certain lifestyle. I would encourage them to think deeper about that. Just because you wear a rainbow shirt doesn't mean that you are saying, I'm that way. It's okay. So I hope that they're okay with everybody else being what they are in life, because that's true freedom. That's real American life.
You're a guy. Right on. Okay, so we got it's the opening of the baseball season. There's a quarterback controversy. There's another pro football league just started. And who knows what else? What do you got next?
Well, as we start off on a next segment of just general miscellaneous sports stuff, I'd love to give a great big shout out to the Tampa Bay Rays. They are an amazing program. Each year, they have a lot of challenges as far as facing up against the New York Yankees, the Boston Red Sox, and the other teams that have a much bigger program in place, have been in the league longer. Each year they come out exactly with more money, but each year the Rays come out with a great team. And this year they're just starting off the season on fire. 11 straight wins. It's the first time since I think 89 that a team has started this strong. So it's a really great sign about the health of that sport. Baseball continues to do well. I wish them the best.
Okay, yeah. Again, the White Sox were losing 1-0 a little while ago. We're talking Wednesday. And
Chicago White Sox, let's go.
What else do we got here? You got any more sports, or are we going to move on to movie stuff?
Well, yes, I'd love to talk with you a little bit more about movies. Of course, you and I both have worked as actors and writers, and I'm a big believer that movies and television shows have a way of impacting people's lives. We can share messages of support and hope and really connect with other people through this medium. I'm a fan of it. I love it. I love being in it. There's some projects out there right now that are really working towards that, trying to get messages of love and support out to the greater community. So I encourage people to support those kind of movies.
You got any examples?
Well, gosh, not one that comes off the top of my head right now. I hadn't prepared that, but I will say that one thing I was wanting to talk to you about is the changes in our industry in regards to the delivery of product. So, of course, traditionally people would go to a movie and then, of course, starting to watch them on television many years ago. But now we have computers that are enabling people to watch a movie anywhere, anytime. These streaming services have kind of changed. Yep, exactly. They've changed the landscape of the film industry. We still want people
to watch sports on here, too. You
Absolutely.
Can watch the White Sox, the Bulls, whatever you need.
Yes, indeed. And, it's something I was sharing with my son about sports and why sports, even though the industry is changing so quickly with on-demand services and streaming, sports continues to do well. And the reason is because it's happening in the moment. In this moment now, you can only catch it live. So as a result, it really drives viewers. And as a result, that drives advertisers. So sports continue to do well, and I see that continuing to grow. But streaming services for movies can actually be a really good thing. Here in Los Angeles, I attended a workshop with Film LA, and they were analyzing the trends here in our city in regards, and the state of California in regards to filming. And of course, it had a big dip 2 years ago because of a pandemic thing going on, but we see it coming back strong. And one of the things that is really driving the success of filming in California and Los Angeles and in Chicago and all over the world are these streaming services, these streaming platforms. They're coming out with great shows. They're some of the best, most interesting shows you can watch. So I encourage people to really think deeply about what they're interested in and search it out, find it. Don't be afraid to check out something new and different.
You want to talk about some more film stuff or some more streaming, or you want to move right over into your favorite project?
Well, I'm very honored to be working on this new streaming project. Wasn't a coincidence.
Moving over to that project. And of course, I'm just trying to get a part in it. Keep going, brother, cousin.
Well, back in the 1930s, there was a character called Dok Sauvage. It was a Pulp Fiction character along with the Shadow. Many people consider Dok Sauvage the original superhero. But as time went on and comic books hit, Superman, Batman, those became bigger characters. In fact, many of the elements of those characters were pulled directly from Dok Sauvage. Dok Sauvage was a scientist, a detective, a martial artist, super wealthy guy who fought crime. Sounds a lot like Batman. And then also, he would go to this secret place where he would train and study called the Fortress of Solitude. Literally. And then later, Superman used that exact same name for their Fortress of Solitude in their storyline. But that was originally Dok Sauvage. They made a movie in the 1970s with an actor named Ron Ellie, who had been Tarzan in the television show Tarzan. And the movie didn't do particularly well, but it was a cult favorite for many people. And what we're doing is we're doing a streaming show, a modern retelling or inspired by the original 1930s character. And ours is called Dok Sauvage. We spell it differently. It's Dok with a K, so it's D-O-K, and it's Savage with a U-E or Sauvage. And it's Dok Sauvage, Man of Copper. And you can check us out online. Check out our website, doksauvage.com. Right now, we just finished filming episode 1, and we did a little sneak preview, a premiere at the Martial Arts History Museum in Burbank, California. It was really kind of cool to do it there because there's a lot of connections with the museum. I myself am a member, and I was at an event called Dragon Fest, which is an annual major fundraising event for the museum here in Los Angeles. And it was there that the executive producer of Dok Sauvage saw me and approached me about playing the role. Also in this show is a gentleman named Americus Abasamas. Americus is a former USA sumo champion, great big giant guy, tremendous actor. He is a guy who's been in Pirates of the Caribbean. He's in Boba Fett, the new Star Wars show. He was in a movie called Let's Be Cops with Damon Wayans. It was an international blockbuster movie. A really cool guy. He is playing the main villain. And we have a really great cast and crew. It's going to be a lot of fun. We start filming literally in 3.5 weeks back up in Fresno, California, which is this project is being filmed in Fresno.
So you're going to shoot the second edition or the second episode?
Correct. We're scheduled to do episodes 2 and 3 in May. And then later in the summer, we're going to do the remaining 5 episodes. It's an 8-episode first season. And for anybody out there who loves movies and martial arts and wants to be a part of this project, go to our website, check it out. Right now, we're raising money with an Indiegogo campaign. Indiegogo is kind of like GoFundMe, but it's specifically for film projects, creative projects. So you can donate some money, get a little gift. We've got really cool perks like keychains and shirts. We also have some signed photos and also a really cool Zoom meeting with myself and Americus, where you'll have a chance to kind of talk with us about movies and martial arts and sports and politics and all that great stuff.
Well, how big is this Americus guy? You say he's a great big guy, but you're like 6'4".
Correct. So he's about 6'1", 6'2", but probably around 400 pounds. Former sumo champion. He is one of the pioneers of sumo in America, really helped push this sport, this martial art, into a higher level of popularity.
So this is a low-budget film, and you are clearly raising some money.
Yes.
But it is also the actors, or at least some of them are SAG. How did that all work out?
Yes, indeed. So myself and Americus
Screen Actors Guild.
Correct. Americus and I are both Screen Actors Guild members. And what had happened was when I met with the executive producer, Americus and I went and talked with him about the project, and we were offered the roles. But in that meeting, I said, I will do it at the minimum, but it's got to be union. I'm a big believer in rule one. For our union, it's never work non-union. That's our number one rule. So I accepted the role, but under the agreement that it would be a Screen Actors Guild role for me.
Adam, let me ask you, we got a few minutes left. What are some of the favorite movies that you, or newer movies that you might want to tell people they should see and give them a little information? I mean, I'm waiting for a good Western. I don't know if you got any of those, but what have you been watching?
Well, I do watch a lot of these streaming shows. We have Disney Plus. We have a variety of other ones, HBO streaming and a few others. And we love to watch these really cool shows. Another thing my son and I love to watch is anime. Anime, of course, is Japanese animated shows. What a lot of people don't know is that in Japan, these type of shows are adult-oriented. Many of them are adult-oriented. There's also children's shows. But here in America, we tend to think of animated shows as for children or cartoons. But in Japan, it's just how it's been for generations. It's a high level of creativity. It's a high level of artistry. And in fact, there was a movie that came out about 1.5 years ago in Japan that is called Demon Slayer. And it was actually a movie that came after season 1 on television and before season 2 kicked off. This movie, when it came out in Japan, became the highest grossing movie in the history of movies in Japan, an animated movie. And so it's just an example of how popular that form of entertainment is there. When you watch anime here as an American citizen, you'll find that it's very creative. The storytelling is very in-depth. The character development is fascinating. I encourage people to check it out. The other thing to know about anime is there's a wide variety of genres within anime. So if you're into mystery, if you're into action, if you're into superheroes, they got that. If you're into romance, comedy, there's animes that are specifically about that as well.
You're clearly into eating healthy food. You've always been working out. You're a serious athlete. You've worked in a lot of health clubs. You're playing Dok Sauvage in a movie. How about giving our listeners, our viewers, a little bit of health tips, whether about weightlifting, food, exercise, whatever. Give us some tips.
And I'll try to keep it brief, but you've opened up a Pandora's box here.
Well, you'll be back on once a month.
So I'm part of an organization called the National College of Exercise Professionals, or NCEP. You can check out our website, ncepfitness.com. We certify personal trainers across the country on holistic personal training, holistic fitness. We also advocate what's called functional training, which is where instead of sitting on machines, you move with your body. You do body weight exercises, calisthenic type exercises, free weights. This is where we believe you become more truly fit. We also advocate what we call the 5 principles of fitness. Number 1 is attitude. Having a positive attitude, having a belief in yourself, that's the key to having great success in anything. And the same is true for fitness. The next is nutrition. And we believe that you should obviously be eating healthy. We have 5 points that we advocate for nutrition. Drink lots of water, eat small meals throughout the day, watch your fat intake, avoid refined foods, especially sugar, and proper supplementation. And then we also believe in cardiovascular training. You should be doing that regularly. We believe in, of course, resistance training, emphasizing the functional training approach. And then another thing that we advocate is flexibility or range of motion training. Everybody should be doing that regularly as well. Keep your body limber and light and fluid.
Right on, Adam. You're good. I'll try to step it up a little bit. I do go in the pool pretty much every day. Eat pretty well. A lot of small meals. I'll probably have one right after this show.
You've always been an inspiration for me, Michael. You're a tremendous.
You're an inspiration for me, and I look forward to just so our listeners and viewers know, your dad, my dad's youngest brother, and my last living member of that generation, had pulled together a family Zoom on Sunday afternoon, which interferes with the White Sox, the Bears, a lot of other stuff, but it's been wonderful to meet some distant cousins and to talk. And it's always good to see you, and I'll see you on Sunday.
Fantastic. I love
Thanks for coming on, Adam James.
Thank you for having me.
First thing I want to talk about at the end here is there are two other shows on the radio. Maybe they're on YouTube too. I'm not sure, but they're from our friends. One is the Hitting Left on Lumpin' Radio with Mike or Fred or sometimes both Klonsky brothers. Fridays 11 to 12, and that would be Lumpin' Radio online. And then a little bit later in the day at 2 to 3 out of Austin, Texas, is KOOP Rag Radio with Thorn Dreyer. Those are two shows, sister shows, so to speak. Coming up, we're going to have our music producer, Lynn Orman, coming on next week with some news. We've got Gordon Mantler lined up to tell us about his new book, The Multiracial Promise. And my daughter, Koya Paz, who happens to be the artistic director of Free Street Theater and a professor over at DePaul, she's coming on soon to tell us about Free Street. So, with all that said, I want to thank all of you for listening. I want to thank Don Rose and Adam James for being our guests. I want to thank our engineer, Hal James. I want to thank other people who help out when they can. And we do rely on them at times. That would be Katie Hogan, Lynn Orman, Tom Clark. And I want to encourage you always to do what progressive athletes like Athletes United for Peace do, is to do sports, not war. We got too much war going on. There's a lot you can do out in the world. Keep studying, keep exercising, keep helping your friends and your neighbors. Do good in the world, because the world needs all the good that you do, that I do, that we do together. So, all power to the people. Over and out from live from the Heartland. We will see you next week.